Before proceeding, viewers are advised to exercise caution. The following is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is a verbatim reproduction of testimony in federal court in the case of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom was packed. People filled all the benches, stood along the walls, and even crowded around the exit for those who couldn't find a spot. There was tension in the air. Spectators, journalists, lawyers, everyone was waiting for something important to happen. Some were drawn to the high-profile trial. Others came out of curiosity. No one really knew what was going to happen, but the atmosphere suggested that it was going to be an unusual day. When Leonardo DiCaprio appeared in the doorway, the room instantly came to life. Several people even exchanged glances. The famous actor's appearance caused surprise and confusion. Some began to whisper, could he be starring in a film based on this case and decided to drop in for inspiration? Or was it a PR stunt? Many thought he had just popped in for a couple of minutes to flash in front of the cameras, as is sometimes the case at premieres or social events. But it quickly became clear that this was not the case. DiCaprio approached the witness stand, and everything about his demeanor indicated that he was serious. He looked different than he did on the red carpet or in interviews. A formal suit, a reserved expression, his eyes downcast. It was clear that he was nervous, even a little tense. He shook the lawyer's hand, took a deep breath, and sat down. When he began to speak, the courtroom fell silent. His first words made it clear that this was not a show or a chance appearance. He had been invited as a witness, and his testimony concerned key points in the case. With each new sentence, it became increasingly clear that he knew much more than expected. He wasn't just repeating other people's words. He was talking about things he had seen himself. His voice sounded calm, but there was tension in it, especially when he mentioned specific events, names, and dates. His story made many people look at each other. Journalists began to take notes quickly. The judge frowned, and the lawyers made notes. Everything DiCaprio said changed the course of the case. His words added weight to the accusations and cast doubt on versions that had previously seemed convincing. After his speech, the courtroom became even quieter than before. People were silent, digesting what they had heard. Even those who had come just to see the celebrity realized that something important was happening. This was not just a visit by an actor, but a moment that could influence the entire trial. Leonardo began his speech calmly, although it was clear that he was choosing his words carefully. The first thing he talked about was a party to which he had been personally invited by Sean Combs, better known as Diddy. According to the actor, it was not just a social event, but a closed, elite party that only a select few could attend. It was held in a large, isolated mansion with round-the-clock security. The area was completely fenced off and no outsiders could get in. According to Leo, all guests were warned in advance not to tell anyone about the party. The guests arrived in private jets, were met at the runway, and immediately taken to the venue. The cars were tinted, and the routes were not disclosed in advance. It looked as if the organizers were trying to hide every detail. At first, everything went as usual. Expensive music played, waiters offered champagne and exquisite food, and well-dressed and clearly wealthy people walked around, both famous, and those whose names meant nothing, but whose behavior betrayed their power and money. It looked like a typical lavish party where people accustomed to a certain lifestyle had gathered. But, as DiCaprio recounted, as night fell, the atmosphere gradually began to change. He noted that some of the guests began to behave strangely. They became increasingly aggressive or, conversely, unnaturally relaxed. People appeared who had not been seen before. They were clearly not part of the glamorous crowd, but for some reason felt at home. They went into separate rooms that were off-limits to other guests. DiCaprio admitted that at first he tried not to pay attention to it. He thought maybe he was just imagining things. But the strangeness became more and more obvious. Some of the guests suddenly disappeared, and he didn't see some of them again until morning. The music got louder, the lighting dimmer, and it felt like everything was moving further and further away from a simple party. It was becoming uncomfortable, and at some point he started thinking about leaving early. It was at this point that his story took on a different tone. Everything he said from then on no longer sounded like a story about a party, but more like a warning. Leo continued his story, and with each word he spoke, the room grew quieter. He said that as the night progressed, he felt more and more that he was not at a social event, but at something completely different. According to him, at some point he began to notice very young people in the crowd, so young that in his estimation, they were not old enough to drink. Their behavior also stood out from the crowd. They looked tense, tried to keep to themselves, and did not seem as happy as the rest. The atmosphere became increasingly oppressive. DiCaprio admitted that he felt uncomfortable, as if he were in a place where he shouldn't be. He described it as an inner feeling of anxiety that grew stronger with every passing minute. He began to instinctively stay away from large groups and increasingly glanced around the room with wary eyes. But the most disturbing moment came when he found himself near the back of the mansion, where there was an inconspicuous door. It was ajar, and, driven by curiosity, he peeked inside. What he saw there knocked him off balance. The room was filled with professional video cameras and lighting equipment. The room had been prepared not for casual filming, but as if for a premeditated and carefully organized film set. There were people lined up and everything seemed to be clearly coordinated. Diddy stood in the center giving instructions. He was in charge, controlling who came in, what was happening, and where everyone was going. No one objected, no one asked questions. According to Leo, at that moment, everything inside him tightened. He immediately realized that this was not just a continuation of the party. Everything looked too organized, too secretive, and grim. It resembled something closed, with a predetermined purpose, and there was definitely nothing fun about it. He immediately left, trying not to attract attention, and soon left the house without saying goodbye to anyone. This story had a real impact on the audience. Many listeners clearly did not expect such details. DiCaprio spoke calmly, without excessive emotion, but this made his words sound even more serious. It seemed as if he had kept quiet about it for a long time, but now he had decided to tell the truth. DiCaprio said that after he looked into that room and saw what was happening behind the scenes at the party, he immediately realized that he couldn't stay there any longer. Everything inside him told him it was time to leave. He approached the assistant who had met him at the entrance and said he wanted to leave the party. But the response was unexpected. He was told that the driver was delayed and would be there soon. When he offered to wait outside, he was gently but insistently asked to go to the living room and wait there. He emphasizes that it didn't sound like a suggestion. Rather, it was a polite demand that concealed something more. There was no rudeness, but he had no choice. He was taken to a separate room, the very same living room. There were no windows. His phone had already been taken away at the entrance, as was supposedly customary at such events, for confidentiality. Soft, slightly soporific jazz music was playing in the room. The only other person there was a bartender standing at the bar, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching and silent. DiCaprio sat in that room for about an hour. He didn't know if he was being watched, if anyone could hear him, or if he could even leave without permission. He didn't eat or drink anything and tried not to move unnecessarily. According to him, it was a very anxious, oppressive wait, as if time had stopped. Only later, when one of the guards finally entered and nodded toward the exit, was he allowed to leave the premises? The car was already waiting at the entrance. He was driven back without a word being spoken on the way. Leonardo admitted that he didn't tell anyone about this for a long time. He felt that if he shared what he had seen, no one would believe him. Everything that happened seemed too strange, too secretive, and he feared that his words would simply be dismissed as fiction. But when allegations against Diddy began to appear in the press, and other people started talking about similar situations, he realized he couldn't remain silent any longer. And that's why he decided to testify in court. After a break, DiCaprio continued his testimony, his voice now sounding even more serious and focused. He said that once, during the same party, as he was walking past the back room, something strange and disturbing caught his attention. He saw a young girl standing there surrounded by adult men. She looked very frightened. Her eyes were wide open, her body tense, as if she was afraid to take a step or say a word. According to Leo, this scene left a deep impression on him. He couldn't understand what was going on, but he felt that the situation was very serious and dangerous. He went on to say that he noticed a strange pattern. Some people who disappeared from the party for a while returned completely different. They were pale, looked exhausted, and clearly disoriented, as if they had just gone through something very difficult or traumatic. This could not go unnoticed. He was particularly alarmed when he heard someone repeat the word "processed." The word was repeated several times and sounded alarming and confusing in context. Leo couldn't immediately understand what it meant, but he felt it was related to what was happening to the people at the party. All of this added even more dark and disturbing details to his story. It became clear to the audience that this was not just about the oddities of a party, but about something much more serious and dangerous, hidden behind the facade of luxury and fun. DiCaprio continued his story, adding important details that helped to better understand how serious it all was. He said that after that party, he spoke with an actor whose name was not mentioned in court. This person shared with him that such private events were not just parties. They were used to blackmail and gather compromising information on the guests. According to the actor, there is a secret list that records who did what and what happened during the parties. This information is not collected for money or direct extortion, but to keep people under control through fear. In this way, influential people can be forced to do what is required of them simply by threatening to reveal these dark secrets. DiCaprio also described what the mansion where these events took place looked like. He noted that the house had been remodeled and rebuilt, not for the comfort or convenience of the guests. Many hidden rooms were specially built, including secret rooms, secret passages, and hidden rooms that ordinary visitors did not have access to. In addition, surveillance cameras were installed in the most unexpected places in the mansion, allowing every movement inside to be monitored. Although DiCaprio did not show any documents or photographs in court to back up his words, he said that he had seen blueprints of the house in a private chat room where other people from the industry communicated. Like him, they were alarmed by what they had learned about these parties and hidden surveillance mechanisms. It was this communication that prompted him to come forward and tell everything he knew. Prosecutors asked Leonardo a very direct and important question. Did you see anyone at that party who you believed was there against their will? This question immediately silenced the courtroom as everyone waited for his answer. DiCaprio said that once, while walking around the mansion, he accidentally went down the wrong floor, not the one where the main party was taking place. When he opened the door, he saw a girl sitting on the floor crying quietly. According to him, she looked very young, clearly younger than most of the other guests. She was alone, unaccompanied, and her face showed genuine distress and fear. Leo tried to approach her, but at that moment a security guard appeared. He quickly closed that door and said that this was the wrong floor, and that DiCaprio should return upstairs immediately. This moment seemed very strange and disturbing to the actor, as if he had accidentally stumbled upon something that people really didn't want him to see. Later, when he tried to talk about the incident, no one wanted to listen to him. Neither the studio he was working with, nor the press, nor even his own team. Everyone dismissed it, didn't think it was important, or simply didn't believe him. What's more, Leonardo was never able to find out who the girl was. It was as if she had never existed, as if she had disappeared without a trace. This story was met with deep silence in the room. Everyone understood that the actor had encountered something that went far beyond the usual rumors and speculation. His words made people wonder how deep these secrets go and how carefully the real events are hidden. DiCaprio stated that he could no longer remain in the shadows and keep silent about what he had seen and felt at that party. He is convinced that Diddy, as the owner of the mansion and organizer of the event, knew everything that was going on in his home. Everything happened under his control, from start to finish. And it couldn't have been any other way. Leo expressed his deep concern that if someone really has the ability to erase people, as if they never existed, to hide facts and disappearances, it means that they have too much power and influence. Such power goes far beyond normal control. It becomes dangerous and destructive. That is why DiCaprio decided to take this step and tell the whole truth in court, despite the possible risk to himself. He wants everything to come out so that there are no more hidden rooms, secret lists, and fear that keeps people captive. For him, it is a matter of justice and responsibility. And then came a moment that no one in the courtroom expected. The prosecutor asked Leonardo a direct question. Had he ever seen Diddy with prominent politicians at events like this? Leo took a deep breath, gathered his thoughts, and answered with one word: Barack Obama. A deathly silence immediately fell over the courtroom. People did not expect to hear that name, and the reaction was almost palpable. After a pause, DiCaprio clarified that he had not personally seen Obama at the mansion, but he was aware that the former president had attended other events organized by Diddy, including pre-election rallies, high-profile fundraising parties, and other private gatherings. Leo particularly remembered one occasion when he witnessed Diddy quietly and discreetly handing an envelope to someone close to Obama. The moment looked very deliberate. No one had any doubt that this was an important delivery made with some specific intention hidden from prying eyes. These words only added to the intrigue and seriousness of the matter, showing that behind closed doors, things were happening that involved not only the entertainment industry but also high-ranking political figures. DiCaprio emphasized that he did not believe Obama was involved in any illegal activities. He said he did not want to accuse anyone without proof. However, Leo added that it was difficult to imagine that a person with such a level of power and influence as a former president could know absolutely nothing about what was going on in his inner circle and at such events. He recalled one incident that, according to him, left a strong impression. It was on one of the evenings in 2016 when someone jokingly said, "Don't let Diddy into Washington with a beacon." Everyone around laughed, but Obama reacted differently. He just smiled. But the smile seemed strange, restrained, and instead of participating in the conversation, he quickly left the room. Leo reiterated that he does not believe Obama ever visited the mansion where the darkest events took place. But at the same time, he felt certain that Obama either knew what was going on or had consciously chosen not to know. This was an important part of his story, which made many people think about the limits of responsibility and how difficult it can sometimes be to distinguish between innocent ignorance and deliberate silence. DiCaprio's words exploded in the room like a bomb. Suddenly, it became clear that this was about much more than just Diddy. There were entire networks of influence, complex connections, and a long silence covering it all. The atmosphere in the room changed. People realized that this was about something much bigger and more serious. The prosecutor turned to Leo again with an important question. Why had he remained silent for so long? The entire audience leaned forward, waiting for an answer, the tension in the room palpable. Leonardo took a deep breath and, gathering his strength, replied simply and honestly, "Because I was afraid." He explained that he was afraid not only for his career, which could suffer from such an admission, but also for his own life, afraid of what might happen to him if he decided to tell the truth. This acknowledged fear added even more weight and seriousness to his words. It was clear that behind the facade of glamour and wealth lay a real danger that he could not ignore any longer. DiCaprio candidly recounted that after that ill-fated party, after everything he saw, the basement, the frightened girls, the threats, and the mysterious conversations about a beacon, he returned home and completely shut himself off for several days. He barely left the house, didn't talk to anyone, and tried to come to terms with what had happened. He admitted that he couldn't sleep properly. He was afraid he was being followed, so he left the lights on all night. To feel safe in any way, he hired security guards who thoroughly checked his home for bugs or listening devices. He literally lived in a state of constant alertness and tension. Then Leo added with a hint of bitterness, "You think that's paranoia? In Hollywood, paranoia isn't just fear. It's a way to survive." These words underscored how tough and dangerous the industry he works in can be, and how important it is to always be on guard so as not to fall victim to someone else's dark plans. According to DiCaprio, he didn't just keep quiet, he tried to change things even though it was very difficult. Once, during dinner with one of the studio executives, he said bluntly, "Something dark is going on. If we don't do something, someone is going to get hurt." He wanted to convey the seriousness of the situation and get support. But in response, he heard a cold and dismissive, "Do you want to roll in the Revenant or not?" It was clear that his warnings were perceived as an attempt to interfere, not a call to action. Every time Leo tried to even hint at what was going on, he was met with either silence or subtle but very clear threats. He said that one producer even told him straight out, "If you say the wrong thing about Diddy, you'll be made uninsurable, and you won't even know who did it." Uninsurable meant that his reputation and career could be deliberately ruined, or that he could be blacklisted, effectively destroying him as a professional and leaving him with no chance of defending himself or explaining himself. These words showed how deeply rooted the system of control and fear was, and why many simply chose to remain silent, even when they knew the truth. In 2021, something happened that finally broke Leo. He was relaxing on a yacht off the coast of Capri, in the company of close friends, in what should have been a carefree and peaceful setting. But suddenly he heard familiar words. Someone was talking about the beacon again. They said, "He's back. It's starting all over again." Those words hit him like a blow to the head. At that moment, Leo walked to the edge of the yacht and The thought flashed through his mind, to jump or not to jump. He remembered all those years when he pretended that nothing was happening, smiling on red carpets, accepting awards, appearing at premieres, staring into cameras and knowing that somewhere out there, deep down, someone was still suffering. This double life was draining his soul. But he didn't jump. Instead, Leo made a firm promise to himself that if he ever had the chance to reveal the truth, he would. And now he had kept his word. The courtroom was deathly silent. Diddy fidgeted nervously, whispering to his lawyer, sensing that everything was spiraling out of control. Leonardo DiCaprio was no longer just a famous actor. He had become a real whistleblower, a man who had decided to fight the dark side of the industry. And he was far from finished with his story. Then the prosecutors took a sealed yellow envelope from behind a screen. As soon as Leonardo saw it, his expression changed dramatically. He looked tense and even slightly anxious. He asked quietly, "Is that the file?" His lawyer nodded in confirmation. Leo began to explain. This envelope was a dossier he had been compiling for years. It contained records, screenshots of correspondence, and notes collected from victims and witnesses of those events. It all started back in 2019, when a former assistant to an influential producer handed him this file with trembling hands. She said, "If anything happens to me, if I disappear, give this to someone who can't be silenced." Leo asked her, "Why me?" She replied, "Because you still have a soul." The file contained incredibly harsh material, transcripts of parties, security, logs, names of minors who were seen entering the mansion but never seen leaving. Leo refused to name these children and teenagers in court. He explained that they deserved confidentiality, and many of them still live in constant fear and apprehension for their safety. But there was one woman who contacted Leonardo herself. Her name was withheld in court, and he referred to her simply as Hope. Her story became an important part of the case. She decided to tell the truth despite the threats and risks. She said she had been sold through connections in the industry and spent 3 months surrounded by Diddy. She was helped to escape by a man she called her guilty friend. Leo read her message, which said, "If anyone finds out what he did to us, he'll be buried. But so will we. I just want someone to say out loud what happened, even if no one believes it." After that, Leonardo looked straight at the judge and said, "That's why I'm here." He ended his testimony by saying that Diddy's empire was not built on music, but on fear, silence, and shame. He added, "Yes, he can dance, but there are always shadows moving with him. You have to look beyond the show and behind the scenes." She said that her life in the industry had turned into a real nightmare. She had been sold through closed connections and agreements that no one dared to discuss out loud. She spent 3 long months surrounded by Diddy, in an atmosphere of fear and control, where her every move was under constant surveillance. One person helped her escape this hell, someone she called her guilty friend, because he was the one who realized what was happening and risked his own safety to help her escape. Leonardo read out one of her messages in court, which sounded like a cry for help and justice. "If anyone finds out what he did to us, he'll be buried, but so will we. I just want someone to say out loud what happened, even if no one believes it." These words were full of pain and despair, but they also expressed a strong desire for the truth to finally come out. After that, Leo looked up and stared directly at the judge, as if addressing the entire courtroom and the world at the same time, saying, "That's why I'm here." His voice was firm, but there was a deep weariness and determination in it. He ended his testimony with words that sounded almost like a warning. Diddy's empire was not built on music and creativity, but on fear, silence, and shame that forced people to turn a blind eye to what was happening. Leo added, "Yes, he can dance and put on a show, but he is always accompanied by shadows, hidden, dark, and frightening. To understand the whole truth, you have to look beyond the glitz of the stage and into the shadows, where the secrets are hidden." The judge announced a short recess, but the courtroom seemed to freeze. No one stood up or moved, as if everyone understood that at this stage, change could no longer be ignored. Even the defense attorneys sat quietly, making no attempt to liven up the atmosphere. When the jury returned to the courtroom, it was immediately apparent that the atmosphere had changed. Diddy turned pale, his face lost its usual calm, and a look of alarm flashed in his eyes. His team began to fuss, shuffling papers, someone whispered in his ear, as if trying to find a way out of the situation. At one point, Diddy suddenly slammed his fist on the table, stood up and approached the judge. They spoke about something, but their discussion remained a mystery. None of those present could hear what they were saying. After that, Leo was invited to the podium for his closing statement. He took a deep breath, cleared his throat, and began to speak in a calm but determined voice. "I'm not here because I hate Sean Combs. I'm here because I believe in accountability. I believe in the light, in the truth that must come out." He paused briefly to let everyone take in what he had said, then continued, "This isn't about fame, Hollywood, or glamour. This is about a system that allowed one man to do whatever he wanted for decades because he was rich, powerful, and dangerous. This is about the people he hurt, while the rest of us looked away and pretended nothing was happening." Then Leo looked straight at Diddy and said something that made the room go dead again. "You once told me that the only thing people care about is the party. Well, the party's over. Now it's time to clean up." The words hung in the air like a silent sentence, and no one dared break the silence. Diddy muttered something under his breath, but the microphone picked up his words, which echoed throughout the courtroom. "This isn't over. This is all fake. They're all actors." His voice sounded depressed and bitter, as if he was trying to convince not only the court and the audience, but also himself that this whole story was just an artificial game, a performance that would sooner or later end and be forgotten. It was clear that he was trying to maintain control of the situation, but something was clearly breaking inside him. Leonardo DiCaprio responded without hesitation, with cold confidence and a hint of irony in his voice. "Well, finally you understand what it's like to be in one of my movies. Only this time, you didn't get a script." His words sounded like a well-aimed and accurate shot, as if he were saying, "Now you are not the director or screenwriter of your life, but a participant in events that cannot be predicted or controlled." Feeling that the hearing had reached its climax, the judge announced that the proceedings were closed. The reporters, as if invigorated by the tense atmosphere, instantly rushed to the exit to spread the sensational news around the world as quickly as possible. Their cameras and tape recorders filled the courtroom corridors with the sounds of news that would soon explode in the media. The jurors remained seated, deep in thought, immersed in silence, as if trying to comprehend the full weight of the words they had just heard. They understood that this was not just a legal case, but a story that affected the lives of many people and, perhaps, exposed a system that no one had dared to talk about before. For the first time during the entire trial, Diddy looked uncertain and confused. His usual self-confidence was gone, and his eyes flashed with anxiety and even fear. He darted his gaze around the room as if trying to find a way out, but his movements were indecisive, and his face was pale and tense. When Leonardo DiCaprio, under heavy guard, left the courtroom, the attention of everyone present was fixed on him. People watched him leave. Some applauded quietly, expressing their support and respect, while others watched silently, perhaps in confusion or doubt. But regardless of the reaction, it was clear that this day had changed everything. Leo's words and his determination to reveal the truth were a turning point, after which there would be no turning back. Everything that had seemed normal began to crumble, and ahead lay a new, more open and brutal path of justice and the fight for fairness.